Max. Take my hands. We will share her.
Oh, Winnie, how generous of thee.
Hocus Pocus 2 is a well-awaited film that many are eagerly anticipated for. I recently did a video on everything we knew on this sequel, but since the release of that video, there has been more revealed. But before I reveal that, I wanted to dissect the first film and ask the question, what would have happened if the Sanderson sisters were successful within their plan, and if they were, what could the sequel look like? Hey guys, and welcome to Film Study, where we analyze films in various ways to make you see it in a different concept. Like what would happen if Zuko didn't join the other side, and where Boo would be in a potential sequel to Pixar's Monsters, Inc. Both videos found in the description below. So in order to do this, we need to do a little rundown of the plot. In the beginning scene, we see the events that lead up to Emily and Thackeray's backstory. The three witches, Winifred, Mary, and Sarah, are whipping up their potion in order to take over Emily's soul, which in turn makes them younger, and makes her body lifeless. They are eventually caught, as every movie does, catching the villain, and punished by hanging. What I'm wondering though is who lit the black flame candle the first time. When Emily walked into the woods, they were already there. Given with these times, there's no telling who could have. However, before they were to be hung for their punishment, Winifred proposed a spell to whomever lit the black flame candle again, and who were to be a virgin, they would revive.
Don't listen! Over your ears! Listen to them not!
That's a weird and specific spell to be put, but magic has its rules and regulations. But if that spell wasn't already placed, how did they appear the first time? In the book of Hocus Pocus and the all-new sequel, published in 2018, the first few lines of the book read, "The world was full of wild things then. It brimmed with oak and hemlock and dark whispering places that turned you round and round until there was no turning back." This sets the scene and would give everyone a sense that the witches had just been summoned somehow. When we see Emily walk into the woods, we don't hear a song that we have heard in the film that Sarah was singing in order to lure the children. However, in the book, it does say that she was attracted to a soft song in the air. Emily was a very adventurous child, not afraid of where the woods would take her, for she was old enough to know the rumors about the Sanderson sisters. But she also knew that whenever she ran across any of them in town, they were kind to her. See, this is where it gets a little confusing to me. How would they get away with roaming around in the town unless they had some pretty good disguises? Another thing I wanted to point out is from the time they had first arrived to the second time, 300 years has passed and Halloween wasn't introduced to the United States until the 1840s. And for more videos like this, we'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. It would really help out the channel and let us know that we are providing great content for you guys. Going back to the story, we get introduced to Max, adventurous himself, as we see him bike through the forest exploring since he had just moved. As he's getting used to his new life in the neighborhood, he and his sister come across the witch's house that has since been abandoned for obvious reasons. What I found interesting, however, is when they first enter the home, there is a display of lighters. So knowing this, why would it be there in the first place? When Winifred casts the spell, it is that a virgin lights the candle and they reappear. So they placed them here before, even knowing they were going to be caught, and they wouldn't need these lighters even to light a fire for their potions, as we saw previously that she has the power of electricity, which can spark a fire. Nonetheless, he lights the candle unbelieving of the tale, and of course we all know what happens next.
Oh, come on, it's just a bunch of hocus pocus.
Max, I'm not kidding this time. It's time to go. Max, no!
So what is their goal exactly? To lure children in order to stay young and survive. The obstacles they face when trying to move forward with this plan is obviously the kids, Cat, and Billy. One thing that would have to change is the cat. As said previously, if Winnie hadn't casted that spell specifically, then Thackeray wouldn't be in the way. If she only had casted the same spell that was on Emily or used her other powers to manipulate him. Considering the powers that she has, it surprises me that she doesn't use them more to her advantage, especially since she has the power to literally move people without their own free will. And also when they left, why didn't they use the brooms that they used the second time to chase after them? Perhaps it was to lead the story to the next event. So their goal is to...
That we must find the book, brew the potion, and suck the lives out of the children of Salem before sunrise. Otherwise it's curtains.
If this plan were to be successful, how would the events of the movie change? One thing that gets in her way is Thackeray, the boy we saw in the beginning of the film. Now in the form of the Black Cat, by cursing him with eternal life, this actually hurt their plans. If only she would have realized this and casted another spell on him, he wouldn't be in the way anymore. Also, reviving Billy, she should have known that he wasn't going to be on her side anyway. The other obstacle is the book. What I think is the witches are more powerful than they appear and are portrayed to be. It also seems that they don't use their head as much as they should, especially since Billy is on the kid's side. In order to get the cat out of the way, the Sanderson sisters would have to reverse the spell, which in turn would kill him instantly considering he was born 300 years prior, which isn't a bad thing as he would be sent to be with Emily just as we see at the end of the film, when the spell does break.
Is that you?
Yeah. The witches are dead. My soul's finally free.
So where we are at now is the scene that is one of the icons, where the sisters get dropped off at the bus in front of a house. Now before we move forward, I want to pause here for a minute. Just as Mary suggested, they stopped because they had the smell of children. But when they got out, even though they were surrounded by them, they claimed to not be able to see them. This gives the question of what is their interpretation of children. They know they are smaller than adults, but what I did notice is every child that passes by that is wearing a costume also has a mask, so surely they don't believe in the characters these kids are dressed in, but they are used to seeing their faces. And the fact that she claims that the screaming guy in the costume is their master tells that they can't see past the costumes because Halloween has a different and spiritual meaning to them. However, they do figure this out later. These little pit stops that they make are all because they don't have the book, but we know from the beginning of the film that they don't necessarily need it for every spell they choose to cast. Now we don't get to see a list of spells that the sisters could cast, which makes this theory a little more challenging, but that just means we have to go with what we see them do and knowing what could be done. Later we do see them cast spells along the way, and of course they end up finding the group through the power of story progression. The sisters could have easily gotten everything they wanted if they used their powers more wisely and more frequently, just like when she summons the book and awakens it. That was a spell that could have been placed a long time ago. However, with what I said earlier, with magic comes rules. The spell is only useful to them if it were to be open. So would it have been prior to when they did? Yes, if Thackeray wasn't in the picture, Allison would have opened it. And it just so happens that in the book, it is revealed that there is a fourth Sanderson sister, Elizabeth, but she is actually good, unlike the other three. There is no word there would be a fourth appearing in the sequel, but I think it's possible. A blood moonstone is also mentioned in the book and could be a representation to what we can see in the sequel. In the end, after retrieving the children, the witches would have been able to get what they wanted, which was life. And that brings us to the sequel. If the sequel were to end off where the supposed story could have gone, they would already be alive at the start and have a new goal, such as possibly taking over the town of Salem or expanding further. However, during the film, the witches seem to target Max, Allison, and Danny, of course to retrieve the book, but even after they still target them, blatantly ignoring all the children that are walking directly up to the house. There was a couple more news updates from the previous video that I uploaded that I want to mention, like a little teaser video that came out on Halloween that featured a close-up of a candlestick that faded out into the film's logo. And mention of a very special cast member making a return, Doug Jones, who is known for playing Billy. But what do you guys think of this theory, and what are your predictions for the sequel coming up? Do you think it's going to be a repetitive story, or do you think they're going to throw another curveball into the mix so it's not a complete copy of the original? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.
Oh, sweet revenge. Do you see, sisters? My curse worked perfectly.
No, that's because thou art perfect.